Okay, so you've got a glass of wine, and we're going to settle down to an evening of sheer delight. The wonderful John Peat, star of Hurlingham Players, is going to interview our very own Martin Bishop, star of stage and screen. And before you start, I need to remind you that you must have your phone on mute, otherwise it will disrupt the interview. And don't forget your questions and answers at the end. But with no more ado, John, we're really looking forward to this. Over to John.
Janie, thank you very much indeed. Martin, enormous thank you to you for sparing the time this evening to give us all an insight into your fascinating career, both before acting and currently. Of course, a lot of us know you from your roles in the Hurlingham Players, you know, the Cherry Orchard and Scrooge. But there's much more to you, I know. You're a very proud Yorkshireman. So why not let's start at the very beginning. Where were you born?
Yeah, I was born in Bradford in 1947, so I'm very much a war baby. The baby bulge, wasn't it called? It certainly was a bulge. There were no places in the nursing home for me, as I recall. And I was actually born on a bath. And there can't be too many people who can say they were born on a bath. They've stuck a door or something on top of a bath. My poor mother delivered me there. So there we go. But shortly after that, my father moved to a job in Catterick Garrison, which is not far from the market town of Richmond in North Yorkshire. So I grew up in the Yorkshire Dales, Swaledale particularly. So I'm a Yorkshireman.
Anyone in your family was theatrically minded?
Yeah. Yes, but I never knew him. My grandfather on my mother's side was theatrically minded, and he ran away to the theatre in his 20s. And I have a wonderful photograph of him with his chums, sat round with dozens of bottles of champagne or dead bottles of champagne all around him. So he always had a great time. But eventually he was found by the family and dragged back. And he became a chemist, I think. Anyway, I think he died of drink in his 50s, I think, or certainly a heart attack anyway, brought on by drink. So there we go. But I never knew him, sadly. He must have been a fun chap.
Yes, he sounds it, very much so. I think you would have got on very well with it. Did anything while you were at school spark an interest in the stage or acting?
Well, yes. One thing my father did, when I was 6, he put me in the church choir. And I was a good treble. You know, I did the old once in Royal David City thing, the start of the carol service sort of thing. And when I was sent away to school, and they obviously realized I could sing. And I got put in things like, you know, Gilbert and Sullivan. So I think my first role was one of the bridesmaids in Trial by Jury. And my mother said I was very pretty. So, and then I played Edith in the Pirates of Penzance. And because I had a starring role as Edith, only those who had starring roles got bosoms, I seem to recall. And I had an argument of whether I should or should not have bosoms, which was very exciting. So anyway, that led to theatre, and I did quite a lot of theatre at school. Some of the things like The Fire Raisers by Dürrenmatt, if you know that play. I played the devil in that, which is wonderful stuff. So yeah, school was the first time I really got involved in the theatre.
Now, after school, you didn't go to university, but you embarked on a very successful career in surveying and construction. And this must have been very satisfying for you. But in your mind, was the acting bug working away? Were you involved in amateur dramatics?
Oh, absolutely. Certainly I left school and I was, I think the phrase is indentured as a surveyor, which one could do in these days. With most professions, you could be indentured. And so I was indentured as a surveyor, but I also joined an amateur dramatic company, which was in Catterick Garrison itself, which was next door. And there was some general called General Carey who had formed a theatre company on the garrison. So they commandeered a Nissen hut and turned it into a theatre. And we used to do a lot there. And one of my great chums there left and joined Rep. And I very, very nearly followed him in my 20s. But I think the truth is I probably didn't have the courage to follow him. And my father reckoned I should get qualifications and get a proper job. And by the time I qualified as a chartered surveyor, I was 27, I think. So by that time, I was married with 2 children. So how the world has changed. So there we go. So to give all that up to be an actor would have been a hugely selfish thing to do, I think. So I didn't.
But you have this very, very successful career, and you progressed through your firm, and there were mergers and acquisitions and everything. And you were offered a really massive role putting 2 firms together, because you having been senior partner. And then there was a major catalyst in your life. I believe that happened in April 2002.
Yeah, I was running a very large firm of surveyors. There were about I think 600 or 700 souls in this firm, and we specialised largely in major engineering projects, like oil rigs and things like that, and railways and refineries, but also we did things like Wembley Stadium and things like that. So we did big projects. And I negotiated a merger with a firm called Mott MacDonald, which some people might know. They're a very large engineering firm. And I was to become Global Customer Relations Director, which is a jolly big job, 10,000 person firm. And we were due to, I remember it very clearly, for obvious reasons, that we were due to sign the deal on the 23rd of April 2000. On the 21st of April, which was a Sunday, we had guests coming for lunch. And anyway, I'd had a couple, we'd opened a bottle of champagne, as you do, when guests come, and I'd had a couple of glasses, not bottles, couple of glasses, and then for some reason I ran upstairs, 2 flights of stairs, and when I got to the top, I felt very unwell. And to cut a long story short, I'd had a stroke, and so I collapsed on the floor, and it was a very strange feeling, I can tell you, like being very, very drunk. In fact, that's what I thought I was. I thought I was drunk because I'd had 2 glasses of champagne very quickly. And I started being very ill. And then I heard Susie, bless her, coming up the stairs saying, "Where are you? All your guests are here. Nobody's got a drink. What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm not really very well." So anyway, top and bottom of it was I'd had a stroke, and I decided that I would not take this job in this merged firm, and I decided to leave. And I wondered what I would do. And since I'd always enjoyed acting and threatened to be an actor when I was in my 20s, I wondered if I could make it as an actor. So I applied to a couple of drama schools. I applied to the Oxford School of Acting, which is a fine school. And I applied to the Guildford School of Acting, mainly because they both had 1-year courses. I felt I couldn't really do a 3-year course at the age of 55. And anyway, I was auditioned at Oxford and failed to get in, at which point I thought, am I really wasting my time here? And I contacted the Guildford School of Acting, which is a fine school. And I remember speaking to the receptionist there, and I said, "Look, I've got an audition on Friday, but I think I'm getting too old for this malarkey. I don't think I'll be coming." Anyway, she persuaded her. I never met her. I never knew who she was, but she persuaded me to go for an audition. And I went for an audition, and they offered me a place, and I decided to take it. So having spent 2 or 3 months on the board of Mott MacDonald, I decided to leave. Which is a brave decision, really, because I left it all behind.
And if I could just stop you there,
yeah,
before we carry on and talk about acting, if you hadn't had this stroke, would you have stayed in your job?
Almost certainly, yes.
Yeah.
So in a way, it was a blessing in disguise, because I've had, it's 20 years since I had a stroke, and I've had a wonderful time for 20 years. Most of my chums at the time would now be retired. And maybe, they all did very well, all my partners in Mont MacDonald, all of them extremely well commercially. But I have no regrets at all about leaving.
Good.
None at all.
Good. So let's turn to Guildford and the start of your learning, your career, your new career.
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as you started that course, did you think to yourself, this is what I was born for? This is
No, not really. I mean, it is quite a brutal process, training at a drama school. Yeah. They sort of strip you down to your basics and try and build you back up again. And you think you're quite good at it, and you're really not. So it is quite hard. And it's quite hard emotionally, because as an actor, you've really got to expose yourself emotionally quite a lot. And I did wonder whether I was doing the right thing. And there were times, I was there every day for a year, just about. And I did wonder often whether I was doing the right thing. But anyway, I got through the course. And I think I learned something there. I'm sure I did.
You were probably, or most certainly, one of the oldest on the course. Anybody else there around your age, or were they all youngsters?
It was meant to be a course for mature students,
right?
Which really was postgraduates, in truth. And I was the oldest, probably by generation. The nearest to me was a chap who was 35, who strangely was ex-army. He was ex-SAS, and he's still a friend today. He's a great friend. But halfway through the course, he got recruited into, I think it's called Ultimate Force. There was a drama series on ITV, I think. And he got the part, one of the main leads in Ultimate Force, and disappeared from the course. So there we go. He did all right. But I'm still friends with him. So it was a strange experience, because really I was a one-off. But I did get a nice part there. We did She Stoops to Conquer. And we decided to do it in the Royal Tennis Court at Hampton Court. And so I was a natural to cast for Hardcastle. And we played it in front of a royal audience. I think it was Prince Edward and Sophie, and the good and the great. And it was, I have to say, playing in a real tennis court is amazing experience. And I learned so much just playing in the tennis court, because the acoustics, if anyone's played real tennis, are very hard. And so you really got to control the way that you speak. And we had a wonderful voice tutor, and I learned more from that guy than anyone else. So yeah, it was a good experience.
Wonderful. Well, I mean, you've had the most fantastic career, and very varied career, both in the theatre, TV, films, adverts, everything like that. But it all started at some stage. How long was it before you achieved your first role? I believe there was India was involved.
Well, I'll tell you that in a minute. But before that, as every actor knows, you need to get an agent. And actors are paranoid about getting an agent.
Yeah, I was going to say how important.
But it's not any agent, because there are a lot of agents out there. And one of the things that Guildford did was to send you for an interview with an agent, just for the experience of being interviewed by an agent. And I was interviewed by a wonderful woman called Elspeth Cochrane. Now, Elspeth was, when I met her, bless her, was 87, and she was still in the business. And she was a wonderful old bird, and she ran Elspeth Cochrane Management. And she'd had everybody through her books. She'd had Ian McKellen through her books, and she used to regale me with stories about James Mason. And she was a wonderful old bird. And so anyway, for some credible reason, she took me on, which I was very, very grateful for. And I was with her, and I got a few nice things with her, but eventually she became very ill, as you might imagine. And I used to go and see her in hospital. And she was pretty much blind by then, and she was pretty much deaf. But once you worked out who you were, you couldn't stop her talking, and she was just chatter away forever. And her stories about James Mason and the time there were quite remarkable. But when I went to her memorial service, you know, the good and the great turned up, and Ian McKellen spoke really movingly about Elspeth. So I think I was a bit lucky to get Elspeth. But then she died, and I was a bit on my own then. And I started looking for work, and I had an interesting job, which I picked up on my own. There used to be a magazine, a sort of news sheet really, called PCR. And forgive me, I don't know what it stands for, but it was pink. And this is sort of pre-emails really, I suppose. And you received it every week, and I went through it, and I used to tick things off. And I saw this advert for two English actors needed to play officers in a production in India. So I thought, oh, this sounds rather interesting. So I applied, and I got the job. Anyway, it turned out I wasn't playing an officer. It was a production called Live 1947, and it was about the birth of India. And there were two of us, two English actors, and each of us had 4 parts each. And I played Sir Thomas Roe, who was the founder of the East India Company. It was a great sort of, it went over time, this thing. It started in 1600 odds. I played a very nasty judge in a thing, in the trial of Bhagat Singh, if anybody knows the history of India, but he was a freedom fighter in the 30s who the British executed. So I played his very nasty judge who sentenced him to death. I played the secretary to Lord Irving, and Lord Irving was played by the other actor. And my final role was Lord Mountbatten. Now, this was a remarkable production. It was set in the grounds outside the great stadium in Delhi. And the director, who did everything, he was the director, he was the producer, he was the project manager, and he created 15 sets outdoors, and there might be the sort of peach room at the Viceroy's house, or it might be the palace of Jahangir, or whatever. But we were there, and this chap Amir Hussain, who was the producer, he created these 15 sets, and he also built 2 railway lines, which would bring in even more sets. So all these little doby wallers would push these railway carriages with sets built on them. And it was quite a remarkable logistical exercise. And the audience were on, they were on a, you know, a sort of bleacher seating, which was a turntable, great turntable. And after each scene, the turntable turned to face the next scene. It was quite remarkable. We arrived out there at the end of, I think it was March in 2000, and might have been 2004, I think. The set it was only half built, so we knew it was never going to open in time. And it opened about 3 weeks later. At the end of the day, it was a sort of very Indian thing. My observations of the Indians is that they are really good at dealing with what is in front of them. Remarkable what was achieved in a very short space of time. But as regards planning was not a strength. Anyway, I kept a diary when I was out there, and it might be interesting if I read 1 or 2 bits to you, because it was really quite chaotic, some of the things that we did. So let me read. When we opened, or just before we opened, the set wasn't really quite finished. So let me read this little bit to you. Last night's rehearsal was the usual sitting about, collected at 7:15 p.m. Only for work to begin about 10:30 p.m. You see, we only rehearsed during the evening because it was too hot during the day. The idea was to go through the whole thing with microphones, a sort of technical rehearsal with lights and stage movement. Literally, the next scene to arrive at platform 3 is the Peat room at the Viceregal Lodge. There were only 8 microphones and dozens of speaking parts, so one can imagine the possibilities for chaos. My first scene is Sir Thomas Rowe. I have a bucket full of lines. Martin, who is the other actor, as my chaplain, has 3 words: yes and in time. I have offered him some of mine, but he's curiously content in his brevity. The steps to Jehangir's court have as yet to be built, so he went up some side stairs which had not really been completed and were unlit. And as I was climbing the stairs, giving forth my first lines, "They're touchy, these Asiatics," I suddenly found a step missing, so the line was completed with an expletive. The East India Company was nearly stillborn.
Lovely, lovely.
So it was a hoot.
Oh, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as we talked about it, you've had this amazing experiences on the stage, and we'll talk later about the Peat Hall Company. But also, you've done feature films, the Hustle, also the Mummy, and everything from there. And I believe recently you've been involved playing Kaiser Wilhelm in Wonder Woman. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And then, of course, television. I mean, naturally, I think, was it Coronation Street you've been in, and probably a couple of soaps on that. But also, I think many of us saw you in 2 fabulous productions, one that's still evolving as we go along, and that is The Crown, where you were George VI Valet, and then also Belgravia, where you somehow managed to play again a butler, or certainly on that.
They certainly like me as butlers.
They certainly do. You're butler material.
I get butlers and valets and solicitors. They quite
like the solicitors. That's I've seen this.
Doctors, senior civil servants, that sort of thing.
But the list is endless. It goes on and on. I mean,
talking about the Crown is quite interesting. I mean, it's a big jump forward, the Crown, to be honest. But I was auditioned for the audition. I think what was it called? It was on the stage with Helen Mirren. Was it The Audience? It was called The Audience.
Right.
You remember that?
Yes, I do.
And then they moved on to. They recast it. They decided to create 2 new roles. One was Macmillan, and the other was Callahan. So I was auditioned for Callahan and Macmillan. And but I'd already by this stage been an understudy 3 times, and I could see what was coming. I knew I would almost certainly get one of these roles, Macmillan or Callahan, but I would have to understudy 4 of the others. And I have to say, being an understudy is a bloody hard job.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great at the beginning because it's a wonderful learning process. Anyway, what was I talking about?
You were talking about being an understudy.
Being an understudy, yeah. So,
hard work.
Previously, my sort of big break, that's a bit of a laugh, but they were doing a show at the Finborough, and I suddenly get a call to audition for a part, which was the lead in T.S. Eliot's The Confidential Clerk. And I went for the audition, and with a chap called Tom Littler, who is now the artistic director of the German Street Theatre. Anyway, what had happened was that the lead actor had got shingles of the eyes, or so Tom thought. What Tom doesn't know is that I met this actor much later, and he told me I didn't really have shingles of the eyes. I just got scared of the size of the role. So anyway, Tom rang me and he offered me the part. And I said, "Are you really going to give me this part?" I said, "God, it's enormous." And we opened in a week. And it's a huge part. The lead in not The Confidential Clerk. I can't remember the name of the lead, but it was, anyway, I accepted it. And I learned the lines every night. I used to go to bed, wake up at 2:30 in the morning, rehearse the lines for 4 hours till 6:30. Then I would sleep for another hour or so, have breakfast, and then I go to work. Anyway, incredibly, in a week, I learned the whole play. And Tom, bless him, did not forget that. And suddenly I found myself up for an audition for the Peter Hall Company, only to be an understudy, but you know, even to be an understudy in the Peter Hall Company is quite a remarkable thing to do. And for me, it was incredible because I could just sit there and watch the good and the great. It was just like a masterclass every day. And so the show was the Browning version, and it was two basically one-act plays: the Swan Song by Chekhov and the Browning version. And those of you who know the Browning version, the lead role is Crocker Harris. And so I was understudying Peter Bowles, who you will know as an actor. The Swan Song is a challenge. It is about 25, it's virtually a 25-minute monologue. And then you've got 20 minutes off, and then you've got the Browning version to do. And it had a wonderful cast, and it had Peter Bowles, of course, and it had actors, some of you might know, Charlie Edwards, James Lawrenson, you will know. I understudied this, and we went on we started off in Bath for 6 weeks, and then we went on a national tour, and we were on the tour, and we eventually got to I think it was the Rose down in Kingston, and bless him, halfway through the week, Peter said, I'm really not very well. I've had my throat. And he said, well, would you mind doing the Swan Song? Because I'll still do the Browning version. So I said, goodness me, the Swan Song. So fortunately, I'd rehearsed the Swan Song every night, literally every night, probably every day as well, probably twice a day for quite a few months. So I really knew it backwards. But the thought of actually having to go on and do this play from scratch, gosh. So for those of you that don't know the theatre, anyway, I suddenly found myself in the wings, ready to go on with the Swan Song. And basically it's an empty stage. And the scenario is that our lead, he's specifically a 68-year-old actor who's had a benefit night, and they've had drinks on the stage afterwards. He's got absolutely pissed, and he's gone back to his dressing room, fallen asleep, woken up in the middle of the night, comes out on the stage, and everyone's gone home, and the theatre is dark. So anyway, there's me in the wings, having to go on for a 25-minute monologue, which I've never done on stage before. And they thrust a candle in your hand, because I had to walk on with the candle. And it's a bit like jumping out of a plane, because there are lights. There's a red light and a green light. And the red light comes on, and you know when it goes green, you're going to jump. And there was a sound effect which Peter Hall had put in, which was a closing of a door, which was sort of meant to represent the closing of the theatre, I think. Anyway, there was this great clang, and the light turns green. And I have to say, it's the scariest moment of my life. Yeah. And I staggered out on stage, and you're drunk, and there's a laugh, it's very funny. I fell asleep in my dressing room. Show finished ages ago, and there I am, out like a light, snoring my head off. Oh, silly old fool. Oh, you old goat, sir, silly old goat. Pissed as a newt. And so it goes on for 25 minutes. Anyway, it got worse or better, depending where you look at it, because over the weekend I get another call from the company manager saying, Peter's really not very well at all, and we're going up to Theatre Clwyd next week. And so Peter will probably arrive on Tuesday. So you've got to do the whole thing. So I suddenly take over as doing the whole thing. doing the Crocker Harris role as well, which is some of you will obviously know the play, the Browning version, and it's a wonderful play. And the writing of the Browning version is amazing, because you simply know if you put one word out of place. It is so beautifully written. So anyway, suffice it to say that Peter never turned up at all that week. So I did the whole show, which was phenomenal for me, which was amazing for me. And the cast was simply delightful to me, I have to say. The first time I did the Browning version, you know, when the curtain came down, the whole of the cast stood round and clapped, and I thought, wow,
Isn't that nice?
This is okay.
Lovely.
But I really knew when I'd arrived. Some of you might know there's a tradition in the theatre on matinees where the matinee of the last performance, the last day, where the cast played jokes. And so I wandered onto the stage doing my Crocker Harris thing, and I suddenly noticed there's a boiled egg in an egg cup sitting on the table with a face on it. And I thought, that's very odd. I don't remember that on the set before. And next time I looked, it had gone. And then I was over at the mantelpiece, and there it was on the mantelpiece. And then I had to go to the bookcase to get out the Aeschylus or whatever it was, and there it was on the bookcase. And what was unknown to me was that the cast had decided this was the missing Peter Bowles, and they'd drawn a face on this egg. And every member of the cast, when they went on stage, had the challenge of moving the egg without me seeing it. So I sort of think that was a you know, I felt I sort of arrived at that point.
Yes, totally accepted.
I felt I was sort of accepted at that point.
Yes. But wasn't there another Penelope Keith?
Yes,
very wise words in the week.
She did. Because of that, bless him, Peter Hall wrote me a charming letter. Because what happens every night in the theatre, a review goes back to the director and the producer, you know, report. And the reports had gone back to Peter Hall, and he wrote me a delightful letter. And he basically said, I will not forget you. And true to his word, he didn't forget me. And he auditioned me for Midsummer Night's Dream down at the Rose with Judi Dench, but sadly I didn't get a part. So, but anyway, he's then doing The Rivals, and he still didn't forget. And he just gave me the part of Thomas the Coachman, which was quite remarkable. And we did 200 performances. But I also had to understudy the two largest roles in the thing, which is Sir Anthony Absolute and the mad Irishman, Sir Lucius O'Trigger, two totally different parts. So you've got to carry these three parts in your head all the time. And I was understudying Peter Bowles, bless him. Bless him, he went sick again. And so I took over the role. So I'm playing opposite Penelope Keith. I'm thinking, goodness me. And she was lovely, absolutely charming. And I remember standing in the wings with Penelope, and she whispered to me. She said, Martin, if you dry, take a prompt. Just remember, it's only a play. Nobody dies.
Lovely.
Which was delightful.
What a wonderful thing to say to make one feel at ease.
Yes, and then we I think we were on tour then at the time. Then we headed up in London at the Haymarket, which was wonderful. And the way things work in these big old theatres, everybody has a decent dressing room, and I had a lovely dressing room, except your importance obviously dictates which dressing room you get, and I wasn't very important at all, so I was right at the top of the building. But you get a loudspeaker in your room, a tannoy, and so you can hear what's going on. And I had quite a big dressing room, and I shared it with two others in it. And suddenly one night, one of them said, something's going on the stage. And it was a night when Prince Charles and Camilla had come in. So it was an important night. We didn't know they were coming in, they just turned up. And anyway, they said, something's going on, something's happening. And it was, bless him, Peter Bowles really had just, it's what they call, he'd fallen off the stage, which is a metaphor for just, he couldn't remember a word, not a word. And some of you will know Tam Williams, who is a member of Hurlingham. And Tam is a lovely chap. He was playing Captain Absolute. And they have this wonderful scene towards the end of Act 1 where they have a row, a blazing row. And Peter, bless him, he couldn't think of a word to say, but being a good old pro, he said, he kept saying, oh, you're a hypocrite, sir. Hypocrite, hypocrite, hypocrite. And whatever Tam threw it in, Tam was sort of throwing half his line back at him to give him a cue and everything else. And he would say, you're a hypocrite, absolute hypocrite. You're a hypocrite. I told you, you're a hypocrite, hypocrite. And anyway, after sort of 5 minutes of hypocrites, Peter Bowles said, I think we'd better go and see Mrs. Malaprop, don't you? And walked off. And so we're hearing all of this. And I ring up the company manager, it's a company, the CSM as they called. And I said, Holly, what's happening? He said, you're on. You're going on for the second half. Oh, God. So anyway, I thought, okay, well, I better go down and pick up the costume and everything else, which was obviously in Peter's room. And as I got to Peter's room, Penelope Keith was coming out. And I said, how's Peter? He said, oh, I've told him, he's just being a big wuss. He said, it's only a play, nobody dies. And so anyway, she convinced him to go back on, bless him. So I never got on that night, which would have been a challenge to take over halfway through.
That would have been quite something. I mean, to fall off the stage as you describe it, has anything like that ever happened to you?
Yeah, it happened to me one night in the Rivals. I mean, you do 200 performances, you know it backwards. And one night I walked out on the stage, I couldn't think of a bloody word to say. But fortunately, the other actors on stage are jolly kind to you and they throw stuff at you, and we got through somehow. I remember buying one of the actors a bottle of wine afterwards. as a thank you. For drying 2,000 to 3,000 people is not a happy experience.
No, God's sake, no, dreadful. Now I've mentioned all these wonderful parts you've played, theatre, TV, and films and everything. What has been your most fun role? There must be something which stands out.
I've had a lot of fun, but what I think, in a way, what I'm most proud of doing is a tiny little thing, which some of you will have seen, which was it was a thing called This Bloody Line. And it was about the partition of India, and I was auditioned to play Sir Cyril Radcliffe, who was the lawyer who was dragged out by Mountbatten to partition India. Anyway, the director was a wonderful Indian director called Ram Madhavani. And anyway, I got the role along with a lovely lady called Leda Hodgson, who played my wife. And he had a very interesting technique. And he wanted us to come down the day before the shoot. And he sat us on a sofa, and he sat in front of us. And he grilled us both. Why did you partition India in this way, sort of thing? Why did you draw the line there and not there? And I hadn't a clue, really, but we already just had to busk it. And it was really fascinating in developing the relationship between Leda and myself, because she was lovely. She was a delightful actress. And we developed a real rapport in doing that, and real empathy for each other and the situation that we found ourselves. And basically the plot was that I think it was in 1960, I can't remember who it was. It might have been T.S. Eliot who wrote this poem about the partition of India, and he was really very cruel to Sir Cyril Radcliffe. And the little film starts with the telephone ringing and Radcliffe picking up the phone, who by this stage is pretty much blind with cataracts. And it was a journalist wanting to know if I'd read the poem in the newspaper, and would I like to comment? And I hadn't read the paper, And so I put the phone down and I asked my wife to read it to me, and she reads it to me and misses out all the bad bits. And only I twig that she's missing out the bad bits. And then I talk about the partition of India and how Radcliffe, you know, had no maps and no up-to-date maps and so on and so forth. And it's a very moving little film. And I'm very proud of that little piece of work, although it's only 10 minutes long. And if you can find it on YouTube, it's called This Bloody Line. And I personally think it's really good. So I'm proud of that.
Lovely.
I'm certainly proud of being in The Crown.
That was a lovely part.
And the nice part, not a huge part, other than technically in 4 episodes, but it was really nice. And I'll tell you a funny story. The director was Stephen Daldry, who was a charming man, and I got a call to do a rehearsal. And King George VI was played by Jared Harris, who you will know. Yeah. And his equerry was Ben Miles. So the 3 of us are doing this rehearsal. And Stephen, you know, is trying lots of different things. And we, you know, I'm struggling to try and tie his, or fasten his collar, I think it is, and failing. That was the scenario, and we tried things like, you have the collar, and yes, I have the collar, and as I pass it to the equerry. And then Ben Miles suggested, he said, why don't I start a limerick? And we thought, what a bloody good idea. And so anyway, when the script came back, it had these 2 disgusting limericks in it. And I'll tell you the first one. I won't tell you the second one.
That's been censored, yes.
If you want to see the second one, watch The Crown, because it's in there, because I never thought for one moment that it would make it. But it was, so Ben is tying the tie and having dismissed me. And it says, there was a young lady called Sally who was fond of a bit of a dally. She sat on the lap of a well-endowed chap who cried, "Sir, you're right up my alley." And I can't possibly tell you the second one.
No, I think we'll hold it there on.
But it was a lot of fun. And I had this other little scene where I was making up the king. I was putting makeup on it because he was really most unwell. And I think it was an extra scene that was added in. I was sort of called back to do that scene, and I had to sort of pot around him and make up his face and everything else, and he was chattering away, saying, there must be no weakness, and that sort of thing. And anyway, Jared was up for a BAFTA, I think, and that's the scene they used on the BAFTA clip, so I was quite proud of that, really.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Martin, we could go on talking for ages. I mean, we've only just scratched the surface of your career, and we could talk about Belgravia and, you know, Wonder Woman as the film and all this type of thing. But I realise that we are
for time,
and also that to allow the audience to throw but one thing I do, I think a good place to finish up is, does the word retirement ever enter your thoughts?
Well, no, not really. As long as I can still do it and they still want me to do stuff, I'm delighted. I mean, the joy of doing film and television is that you can fluff a line, you can just do it again, and which is really quite good. And I realize I'll never get a major role at my age, but I do get nice little roles in important films and big films, and you suddenly find yourself working with Tom Cruise or Michelle Pfeiffer and whatever. You got to pinch yourself, really, and you've got a scene with James Norton or Kenneth Branagh or whatever it is, and you think, wow, this is fun. Why would I want to retire?
Exactly. Yeah. And the odd advert, I believe, is.
Oh yes, I mean adverts.
In a white suit, yeah.
And I just mentioned 2. One is, I think it's Pringles, which for some bizarre reason, they took us all the way to Berlin to film. And we sat in a car in a petrol station, and somebody pretended to pump tins of Pringles through the window. It was a Christmas advert, and all I had to do was sit in the back and eat Pringles, which was a lot of fun. Anyway, they keep showing it every Christmas. They keep showing it, and a little check, a check drops through the door. And the other one, which is out there at the moment, which everybody has seen, surely, is the Euro Millions one, where
that's the one I was thinking
all the way to the Pacific coast of Costa Rica, and we filmed on this idyllic beach. And basically, the scenario was that the winner of the Euro Millions arrives in a helicopter, and I'm at the end of the red carpet, and I say, "Welcome to Cathy Island, Cathy," and that's it, and it's great, and it keeps on going, and I think probably because they can't make any more because it's very difficult to make new ones, so they keep showing the old ones. So the gift that keeps on giving. So what's not to like?
Well, Martin, I think that's a wonderful point to possibly conclude that stage of the evening. Thank you so much. It's been fascinating. As I say, we could have gone on and on and on. There may be, who knows, Martin Bishop Part 2 later on in the year. We never know on that. At any rate, I would now like to hand over to Terry Lester, who's going to ask Martin the questions that the audience have for you. So over to you, Terry.
Okay, well, you actually preempted a couple of them, John, so well done on that.
Oh, right.
You managed to get Martin to answer them without any intervention. So, okay, Martin, what part has the Hurlingham Players played in your life?
Well, I think I joined the Hurlingham play. I joined Hurlingham from memory in the early 90s as a full member. I think I was an off-peak member or whatever they were in those days, and from about 87. And I think it's Sandy. I think he's watching here. I think Sandy offered me my first part, and I think was it in. I can't remember what it was in now, but I'm pretty certain it was Sandy. So I got involved.
Guys and Dolls.
Guys and Dolls, that was it. Guys and Dolls, and I played Nicely Johnson. Thank you, Sandy, for coming in. Yeah, and that was great fun. I have to say, Sandy told me off before taking 3 encores for Sit Down, You're Rocking a Boat. Which she was not very happy about, I think, Sandy, but there you go. That's showbiz. So, but we've done a few things since, but not as many as people think. And I enjoy the hurling players. What I occasionally find frustrating about hurling players is that, you turn up for rehearsal and only half the people are there. So, I mean, you've been there yourself, John. So,
oh God, plenty of time.
Yeah, and so that is a very frustrating experience, which of course in the professional world never happens.
Yeah.
Everybody is always there on time. So so that's a different, but yeah, and I enjoy doing it. And I particularly enjoyed doing the Cherry Orchard, which was a lovely part with Sarah Forrest directing, who's a great director in my view.
Yes, I was in that with you, which is great fun.
You were. It was lovely, wasn't it, John?
Yes, it was great fun. And Scrooge.
And Scrooge. Well, yes. I didn't know what I was letting myself in for with Scrooge, because it was Scrooge the pantomime, which wasn't, I didn't realize it was Scrooge the pantomime when I auditioned, but there you go. Anyway, it was
that was great fun.
Okay.
Over to you, Terry.
Do you have an acting icon?
You mean somebody who I really admire?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Who would that be? Charles Dance is someone I could aspire to, I think. Charles Dance he doesn't seem to have changed in looks for about 30 years, does he? But the sort of parts he plays, I would love to play. He's a remarkable actor, and he keeps cropping up. In fact, I've just done a thing, I don't know what it's finally going to be called. It's probably going to be called The Sandman. But he was in that. And he was charming, and I just had a tiny little role as a psychiatrist, usual thing, doctors, so I played a psychiatrist, but he was charming. quite lovely man. So if I could get half the roles that he could get, and Alan Richardson as well is someone I used to admire hugely. You know, House of Cards and all that. I thought he's dead now, but so that's yeah.
Okay, this could be quite a philosophical question, but what's your take on modern filming techniques, so kind of CGI and the like? And I think that a few years back there was a big hoo-ha because they resurrected Peter Cushing for a part in a Star Wars movie. He'd obviously died, but they cobbled together stuff and formed a part for him.
Oh gosh, well, it's incredibly clever stuff, and I mean, technology affects everybody's life, and it certainly affects the television and theatre for sure, in a way that it never did before. I mean, when everything was filmed in, you know, in celluloid, you know, you had to be very precious about the amount of film. Now you can film all you like forever. But I mean, if somebody wants to resurrect me after I'm dead, I don't have a problem with that at all, to be honest.
Okay, and final question. Would you encourage others to follow a passion later in life?
Well, yes. I mean, it's a big decision, and I had a big kick up the backside to make me do it. But it's interesting. We've seen that Alan Flitcroft is retiring, and Alan is a young man. I don't know how old Alan is, but I'd be surprised if he's in his 60s yet. And he's retired early while he's still got his wits and everything else, and he's going to do writing. He wants to write, and I think that's a wonderful thing to do. But you can only, I convinced Susie that I could do it because we owned our own house. You know, we had a bit in a pension fund, et cetera, so we could afford to do it. You know, if it all went wrong, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Even though I was giving up a very, very good salary. And we, you know, it's 20 years pretty much since I had a stroke, and we've got by. It's remarkable where work comes from. And I'm still getting work as an actor, and I think I'll probably still be getting work in another 4 or 5 years' time, unless I completely lose my wits or I fall off my perch. So, you know, I would certainly advocate, you know, everybody thinking about it, but it does change your life, and it does change your way of life. And it affects partners as much as anything else. Now, I was always very mindful of how it would affect Susie, but Susie, bless her, was very supportive of the decision that I took. Yeah, but give it a go if there's something that you really want to do. And I sort of feel it's sort of never too late. 55 is getting a bit late, isn't it? But it wasn't too late. Because I've done nearly 20 years of it. I mean, a lot of the people I work with today, I'm far more experienced than they are. So, yeah, there we go.
I just want to say, Martin, thank you again for an absolutely fascinating talk, and really was terrific. And as I said, we could have gone on for hours about reminiscing, but thank you so much. And Janie, over to you for the last words.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. That was absolutely amazing. I mean, there was so much in it. I mean, apart from your acting, your life and everything. I mean, I thought it was wonderful. It exceeded all dreams. And I always wanted to be a presenter, and look at me, suddenly I'm a presenter. Wow. We could have listened to you for hours, but I'm afraid we've run out of time. So thank you so much. And John, that was fantastic. Thank you both.
Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you, John.
Not at all. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Janie.